From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Hi everyone, welcome to WION Live broadcast with me, Susan Tehrani. We are coming to you live from New York City. First, let's take a look at this hour's headlines before we go straight into our first story from the Middle East. EU ministers express mount alarm over an Israeli military assault on Rafah in the Gaza Strip, with the bloc's top diplomat warning it would cause a lot of casualties. Police clear a pro-Palestinian encampment at the University of Chicago and Hyde Park and warn that anyone who remains will be arrested for criminal trespassing. Ukraine says it has detained 2 Ukrainian security forces involved in a plot coordinated by Russia to assassinate President Volodymyr Zelensky. Russian President Vladimir Putin says that he's considering leading Russia a sacred duty as he was inaugurated for a 5th Kremlin term, prolonging his more than 2-decade rule. Russia remanded a U.S. soldier in custody until July in the far eastern city of Vladivostok after he was detained on suspicion of theft. Stormy Daniels is expected to appear as a witness in Donald Trump's trial as prosecutors build out their argument that the former president was responsible for illegally covering up a hush money payment in the run-up to the 2016 election. And the Denver Nuggets are humbled by the Minnesota Timberwolves at home. The defending champions have a mountain to climb in the Western Conference semifinals. The Palestinian militant group Hamas agreed to a Gaza ceasefire proposal from mediators, but Israel said the term did not meet its demands and pressed ahead with strikes in Rafah while planning to continue negotiations on a deal. Our next report tells you more.
There was cheering in Rafah in Gaza on Monday night after Hamas said it had accepted a ceasefire proposal from mediators, even as residents fled the city in fear of an Israeli assault. But any likelihood of such a ceasefire taking place was quickly played down by Israel. Hamas said in a brief statement that its chief had informed Qatari and Egyptian mediators that the group accepted their proposal for a ceasefire. It comes as Israeli forces struck Rafah and ordered residents out of parts of the city, which had served as a last refuge for more than 1 million displaced Gazans. A spokesperson for the Israeli military said all proposals that would release hostages held in Gaza would be considered, but said that for now, its operations would continue. In Tel Aviv, families of hostages kidnapped by Hamas in the October 7 attack called on President Benjamin Netanyahu to take the deal.
Save lives, don't talk about fighting in blood.
An Israeli official speaking on condition of anonymity said the proposal that Hamas had accepted was a watered-down version of an Egyptian offer and included elements that Israel could not accept. An official briefed on the peace talks, also speaking on condition of anonymity, said, however, that the offer was effectively the same as one Israel had agreed to at the end of April. Israel said on Monday it was conducting limited operations in part of Rafah, following a rocket attack that killed 4 Israeli soldiers the day before. Omar Shakir with Human Rights Watch said an invasion of Rafah would be, quote, unlawful and catastrophic.
The areas that have been marked for evacuation are areas that have been decimated by Israeli forces that do not have the infrastructure needed for human life.
A spokesperson for the U.S. State Department said Washington would discuss the Hamas response with its allies.
It would bring an immediate ceasefire. It would allow increased movement of humanitarian assistance, and so we're going to continue to work to try to reach one.
We earlier spoke to Ian Bremmer, the president and founder of the Eurasia Group and G0 Media, who talked to us about tensions in the Middle East. Take a listen.
It appears that both the United States and Iran, not to mention, of course, the Gulf states, China, the Europeans, there are a lot of countries here that strongly want to ensure that this conflict does not escalate out of control across the region. Unfortunately, the two principal antagonists, Hamas and the Israelis, are not so interested. They think that there's still a lot of unfinished business here, and that makes it a lot harder to contain. I can see what the resolution looks like in the sense that, you know, a Palestinian Authority with a technocratic government needs to be running Gaza, and the security needs to be provided externally, maybe with Egyptian soldiers and Gulf money and support from the U.S. and the UN. I mean, I can see that outcome being successful, but I don't see this Israeli government supportive of that outcome. So we would need a new Israeli government, which could happen within 6 or 12 months. I mean, the one country that could play more of a role that hasn't so far is Iran. And I say that because Iran is, of course, the primary ideological, military, and intelligence supporter for the so-called axis of resistance, which includes its proxies in Syria and Iraq, perhaps now Bahrain, the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and also Hamas in Gaza. I think that part of the reason the Israelis have been fairly austere in how many troops they have on the ground in Gaza, and most of the actual troops have been withdrawn at this point, is because they're a small country, they're a small economy, and they want to make sure that they will be able to defend the northern border should hostilities open up with Hezbollah, whether the Israelis initiate them or whether it comes from Lebanon. I think that's an open question. If the Houthis are involved in a broader war, America is going to be involved in that. The UK is going to be involved in that. Probably Germany, France will be involved in that. If the Iranians are involved in a direct war, the U.S. will be involved. So, I mean, certainly there is an interest of the Israelis to the Israeli government, certainly, in recognizing that if they're poking the bear in Iran and Iran responds and retaliates in a spectacular way, then the Americans will get involved in the war. And you will remember.
Moving on, Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has shut down domestic dissent and ramped up confrontation with the West, officially begins his fifth term. Our next report gets you more on the oath ceremony from inside the gilded Grand Kremlin Palace, where Putin vowed to defend the Russian Constitution as a crowd of hand-picked dignitaries looked on.
Клянусь при осуществлении полномочий президента Российской Федерации. Клянусь.
As the President of the Russian Federation, I swear to respect and protect the rights and freedoms of people and citizens, to respect and protect the Constitution of the Russian Federation, to protect the sovereignty, independence, safety and integrity of the state, to loyally serve people.
Защищать суверенитет и независимость.
We do not refuse dialogue with Western countries. The choice is theirs, whether they intend to continue to try to restrain Russia's development, to continue a policy of aggression, continuous pressure on our country for years, or to seek a path to cooperation and peace.
Выбор за ними. Мы уверенно смотрим вперед.
We are a united and great people, and together we will overcome all obstacles, implement all planned. Together we will win.
Более динамичным и еще более мощным.
It is day two of Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit to France. The high-stake visit to Europe is Xi's first in 5 years, and it comes amid frosty ties between the European Union and Beijing. As EU is seeking to decrease its dependency on China, Xi's trip is seen as his way of unleashing a charm offensive as he tries to woo European leaders. On day one of the visit, French President Emmanuel Macron rolled out the red carpet for his Chinese counterpart. A series of high-profile meetings then took place, including bilateral talks between the two leaders, and a trilateral, which included EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen, EU-China trade, and Ukraine have dominated the talks in Paris. While on day two, Macron is taking Xi Jinping for a lunch in the mountains dear to him as the birthplace of his maternal grandmother. Macron's adversaries say that with this, he is breaking with the protocol for a chance for one-on-one direct chats with Xi. What is also interesting is the gift that Macron gave to Xi. He gifted him 2 bottles of French cognac. This seems to be a careful selection by the French president. China recently opened an anti-dumping investigation into European brandy, which mainly means French cognac. Chinese decision is seen as a retaliation for EU investigations into Chinese subsidies for electric cars and medical devices. So the gift selection seems to carry a diplomatic weight. Speaking of which, the visit has not all but filled with friendly gestures. While EU leaders urge Xi for fair trade practices, Xi Jinping has denied there was any problem of Chinese overcapacity in global trade at talks in Paris. Xi also spoke out firmly against criticism of his country for its close relationship with Russia during the war in Ukraine. He pressed that China oppose the crisis being used to cast responsibility on a third country while tarnishing its image and incite a new Cold War.
China has stated its position on the Ukraine crisis on many occasions. China is neither a creator nor a party involved in the crisis. However, we are not watching the fire from the sidelines. We've always been playing a positive role in achieving peace.
Meanwhile, on the first day, French and Chinese companies concluded some agreements ranging from energy, finance, and transportation on the sidelines. However, most of them were agreements to cooperate or renew commitments to work together, and there have been no significant deals. Former U.S. President Donald Trump returns to court after facing a threat of jail time for additional gag order violations. There are reports that prosecutors may summon key witnesses, including adult film actress Stormy Daniels. On Monday, Judge Juan Merchan held Trump in contempt of court and fined him $1,000 for violating the gag order. The order prohibited him from publicly attacking witnesses, jurors, or court staff and their relatives. 77-year-old Trump is charged with falsifying business records to reimburse his lawyer, Michael Cohen, for a $130,000 payment made to the adult film star Stormy Daniels just days ahead of his 2016 race against Hillary Clinton for president. Trump, whose trial is taking place 6 months ahead of an expected White House rematch with Democrat Joe Biden, was also fined a total of $9,000 last week. But Merchan said that these penalties were not serving as a deterrent, and he would have to consider jail time for further violations. Before the day wrapped up, prosecutors said that they expect to have at least 2 more weeks for witness testimony, drawing an angry reaction from the former president.
The government didn't have another witness, so they didn't even have time to fill it out. And then they complained. So I'll tell you what, I hope you report the story accurately. This is a real threat to our country, and it's a serious threat to the Constitution.
In addition to the New York case, Donald Trump has been indicted in Washington and Georgia on charges of conspiring to overturn the results of the 2020 election won by President Biden. He also faces charges of illegally storing huge quantities of top secret documents taken from the White House at his home in Florida. It is time for a short break, but when we come back, we'll tell you about heavy storms that continue to batter states across the United States. At least 16 tornadoes were reported in multiple U.S. states overnight. We will get you all of those details and more.
Know more, understand better, think ahead. Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Get the facts, not the bombast. On the 26th of March, dynamic pricing